Hare Krishna, everyone. This is Mangala. I have a bit of an afterthought. We had such interesting discussions around sensitivity in our Bhagavad-gītā class on verse 438. And I just wanted to make the difference between sensitivity that is helpful for a spiritual path and sensitivity that is destructive for a spiritual path more clear. So in this class, we were talking about how in our life, we are always either moving towards Krishna or away from him. So whatever we do, we're never inactive, and all of our actions are either directed towards Krishna and Bhakti and love or away from it. And then we got into talking about sensitivity, and I just wanted to add how sensitivity relates to our towards moves and our away moves. So what I, in general, find super interesting on the Bhakti path is that sensitivity is something that is not just problematic, because often we hear people telling us, don't be so sensitive, you should really toughen up. And that always makes it sound like being sensitive is something that is negative and to be avoided. But on the Bhakti path, or any yoga path for that matter, we are actually trying to become more and more sensitive. Sensitivity is helpful on these paths. In the Yoga Sutras, for example, it is stated that a yogi, in one of the commentators, states that a yogi is as sensitive as an eyeball. I mean, just imagine that. I think the eyeball is probably one of the most sensitive organs that we have. And what we are trying to do on our Bhakti path is we are trying to move from a place of being selfish to a place of being a servant that is able to please. So we're always saying that the goal of Bhakti is to try to please Krishna, to please the Vaishnavas, to offer something to them that will make Krishna and the devotees happy. And this is like the major misunderstanding we have in this world, is that we think we will be happy when others serve us, when actually the only way for us to be happy is if we can also share our love with others. So we're trying to come from the place of looking how we can get something from others and being selfish, to a place of seeing how can I contribute to the love or to the life of other people with my love. And what gets us from selfishness to this place of being a servant that is able to please is sensitivity. What are we sensitive of? We are sensitive of the needs and feelings of others. Why? I mean, we can also be more sensitive towards our own needs and feelings, our true needs and feelings, the ones that will actually make us progress towards Krishna, like our need to be in loving relationships, or our need to do something that is meaningful and worthwhile. But specifically, what really is important, because why am I saying this? Because if we're more able to authentically take care of our true needs, we will also be a better servant. Well, because you can't serve someone from a place of being unfulfilled, needy, and out of balance yourself. But having said that, what I was referring to, or what I wanted to highlight here, is that if we want to come from a place of selfishness to a place of being a servant that's able to please, we need to be sensitive towards the needs, feelings of other devotees and of Krishna ultimately. And I also referred to this in the lecture that Sutta Prabhu writes about this in his book on the Bhagavatam. He says that this whole world is a cosmic sensitivity training so that we will become better at interacting with others. So that's basically like the whole purpose of this universe, is that we can increase this sensitivity. And he also says a bit earlier in the book that insensitivity is what makes us go backwards. It's what makes us take away moves, is when we are insensitive. And because that will lead us to doing aparads or offenses towards Krishna and others. And another interesting point that I came across recently was something I heard in a class that's called Bhakti 101 by Kaustuba Das from the Bhakti Center in New York. And he was saying that we are trying to increase our sensitivity, and that also depends on the type of body that we have. And if we live our life in a way that is dull, unkind, and insensitive towards others, we will also then get a body in our next life that is more suited to living a dull and insensitive life. So that's why, as a yogi, or especially bhakti yogi, we try to be as kind and gentle as we can. So this sensitivity towards others is like a prerequisite for, and not only prerequisite, also an integral part of bhakti yoga, of being able to show and feel love towards others and express it also. You can't interact with someone if you're not aware of that person, or if you don't care about that person. You can't interact in a loving way with them. And so this is the one type of sensitivity that moves us towards Krishna. And then there's another type of sensitivity that moves us away, and that is when it's related to our identification with our body and mind. Not that our body and mind are not valuable or important, but they can be very useful in Krishna service and in Bhakti Yoga as something we can engage in Bhakti Yoga, but they become a problem when we mistake them to be our true self. And when we are sensitive towards someone, or if we are overly sensitive towards someone attacking our false ego in that sense. So in a way, it's natural and important to have boundaries and protect ourselves. But if we are overly busy with that, it's just a huge distraction from spiritual life. So sensitivity takes us away if it's related to ego. And it takes us towards Krishna if it's related to service and love. And mostly when it takes us away, when it's related to ego, it's because it triggers our own insecurities, our feelings of, am I good enough? And when we are overly identified with our present material mind and its conditioning and programming, And if we're not able to let go of if we're not able to unhook ourselves from that and observe it and see it as something that isn't us and doesn't need to always be fought with if it's attacked in that sense. So there's a lot that I could add about this. It's a whole issue of our self-esteem, about our hurt self-esteem. And on the one hand, we can see where our self-esteem is hurt and how we can heal our wounds. On the other hand, what we are trying to do in Bhakti is to transcend it also, to find this incredible love and peace that comes with realizing our true identity as being a servant of Krishna that is ultimately not permanently associated with the mind and body that we have right now. That's kind of an unhooking and detaching from this material identity and identification. And so I'm almost coming to an end here. One more thing I wanted to say about sensitivity that brings us towards Krishna is that there's a couple challenges here. One challenge is that if we are in the ego and say, when we have this attitude, others should behave in a way that pleases me, that's an insensitive attitude. And that's what we're trying to give up. We're trying to see what are the needs of other people. And another thing that can make this hard to see is if we project our own idea of love and what we need and what we think is important onto other people. It's not as selfish as completely forgetting other people, but it's also not fully at a servant mentality, because we're still acting very much out of our own ego and our own understanding of the world. So ultimately, what we really want to learn to become a good servant that is able to please and show love is we want to learn to understand other people's values and needs and their language of accepting and understanding and reciprocating love. We talk about this often also in relation to Krishna, to see what pleases Krishna, what does Krishna like, and then to try to do things accordingly. And we can also apply that to devotees, to really get out of our own mind of thinking, let me do everything the way I like it, and then offer it to someone else, and then to assume that person will automatically like that. But rather to let go of that and see what is something that this person may actually truly like. Let me get to know them. Let me try to understand that person. And the better I understand someone, the more sensitive I can be towards their needs and feelings. The more I interact with them, the more I talk to them and ask them, and not just assume, but to really clarify what they actually need, how I can really support them. So I hope this little afterthought was helpful in clarifying this whole discussion that we had on sensitivity and the difference between sensitivity that takes us towards Krishna and sensitivity that takes us away from Krishna. And thank you so much for tuning in, for supporting us in here, and I wish you all the best in developing your sensitivity further. And till next time, Hare Krishna.